So we should now say that we've basically just talked for an hour. So if you are about to start this video, probably get on the turbo
and just listen
to this one. Yeah. It's not
it's not going to be the most engaging to watch.
No,
unless you like Jack's face.
You don't. Trust me. You need to listen. Face for the radio. Yeah, so we have covered
kind of how we got started, like where it all came from, us working together, difference between racing as an age grouper and as a pro, some of the kind of sponsorship battles, how we make our money or not.
More not.
Some of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, and how to grow a brand and goals for the future and what Hawaii might look like.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Right, where do you want to start?
The beginning? Where do you want to start?
I don't know.
I feel like this is from your direction, so it should start where you want to start.
Let's go chronologically then.
Yeah.
Of when we started working together, which was 2018?
Yeah, I think 2018 when I met you on that training camp.
In Gran
Canaria. And I guess you were doing quite a lot of sports photography as a bit of a hobby. Although not really, actually.
No, I think I'd only picked up a camera 2 months before.
Okay. But you put on this aura that you'd been doing it a while.
Yeah. Throwing a shit at a wall, some stick. I was doing a bit of architecture photography.
Yeah.
And I'd done a bit of video editing rather than video film. More like with a GoPro, traveling with friends, put some videos together to capture memories more than anything. And then I was keen to get started in sports photography, which coincided precisely with us starting that season. I was out training with you rather than taking any photos. And then decided to start a sports photography business as 226, which coincided with your sort of first season at the front of the age group field. Is that fair to say?
No, I'd say 2017 I was kind of up there.
Okay.
But 2018, I guess, was thinking more future plans, I reckon.
Yeah.
So I think 2018, because 2017 is when I came third in Kona in my age group. And so 2018 was I definitely want to go back and I want to win Kona. What other races did I do that year? That must have been Nice that I was doing, the Ironman. And I did some 70.3s as well, but I can't remember. But anyway, so that was my year where I was like, right, I want to really build on 2017, get back, win Kona, and kind of
we must have met 2018 then. 2019.
Has it not actually been that long?
No, I think it was. I think we met start of 2019. So you must have just won your age group in Kona.
Yeah.
And then we met 2019 because then literally 2 months later we were in Slovakia.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked well, didn't it? So we only really had one season of shooting and racing. Yeah, because I can't have had the business 3 years.
No.
I've only had my business 2 years.
Although, were you out in... I don't even know what we're talking about.
Cut!
But were you not out in... I feel like Gran Canaria was the year before, because that's when it was all still stage 7.
Yeah, it was, but it was...
But it was actually... That was 20... Okay. Ignore me then. I think I'm just going with... I feel like I've known you for way longer than that.
Yeah. I think it was 2019.
I can very easily just go back to my photos and have a look. 2019.
So we met 2019 in Gran Canaria on a training camp, So I was still stage 7. Yeah, so I've kept that as an architecture brand. It doesn't do anything, just as how it started. And then, set up sports photography. So I was looking for some athletes to create for, to practice, really. So there was you, Sam Pichter, Brett Halliwell, and the ASICS front runners, because I was running with them. And I think that was it. And Sophie Bubb.
Yep.
Then we went to
so that actually... Yeah, okay. That puts into a bit more perspective then, I guess, of why we then, when I went pro, got to kind of where we got to in terms of us both, I guess, having been quite new into it.
Yeah.
That's why it kind of worked.
Slovakia had the crash.
Slovakia, then Roth, yeah.
Yeah, then had the crash. And then it was...
Then I did 7.3.
Nice. And I was out in Nice.
You were out in Nice.
Took some photos. And then...
Came and partied at Wayne's.
Yeah, had It's such a good night. I can't remember any of it, but it was great.
You were there with your big camera.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that, but
You got some sneaky shots.
it's actually because I was shooting on the beach at sunset, and then to get back to my apartment would have taken me like 40 minutes to drop the camera off. So I was like, I'll just wing it and take the camera. Luckily, it didn't get broken. So then you went to Kona, did very well, won the age group field and decided to go pro, which coincided perfectly with me being like, okay, maybe I should start creating more content around races and stuff. I wasn't in Kona. I went to Maryland instead.
And got your qualification for
I got my Kona spot
this year's Kona.
For 2020, which became 2021. So yeah, and then you decided that you wanted to try YouTube alongside going pro as a different, not revenue stream, more traffic stream, a different like angle to the brand, I suppose, and a way to tell the story.
Yeah, I think part of me thought it could be quite interesting for people going from being an age grouper from like a really corporate background, turning pro, kind of what does that look like? What have I changed, or what am I thinking about changing? And I think also part of me was like, it's probably quite a good thing to get into for them when you start looking at sponsors. It's again something a bit different to offer that shows a bit more of who you are and helps you connect with people. So yeah, I thought it would be a good idea to do, but I also knew that I wasn't going to be very good at doing it. So had the help of my lovely assistant. Yeah, I think that's where I sort of came to you with I'd quite like to do a YouTube channel. Do you want to start getting more into video? And if so, shall we do something together?
Yeah, and I think we started with the view of I would document your journey to Kona 2020 for free for me to learn video and better understand YouTube and the platform and that sort of thing, which then obviously Kona didn't happen and lockdown happened, so that kind of morphed a little bit, but it became a really good bargaining tool for talking to sponsors, and
it hopefully will be talking to sponsors going into next year.
Although we should say that like I have done well in selling shots back to your sponsors, so I have seen kickback from that, and the channel is now monetized, so I am on a quite high percentage of the channel, and the percentage will come down as the revenue goes up, so that in theory my income stays similar to just keep my retainer, and you see, as you should, an equal profit.
And I guess
a proportionate profit of that.
And I guess a bit of it as well in terms of through being my kind of support crew and helping to do the YouTube and some of the content, obviously that's then given you some broad opportunities in like Daytona and Tulsa, and helped link you up with some more people that you can sell more shots to.
Yeah, and that has happened. So like if we look at Daytona for the example, you took the, not gamble, but like you decided to put me out there instead of, like you could have taken anyone as a support person, took me for the content, and that saw a huge boost in the YouTube and the content, and then I was able to sell shots to some of the bigger brands, so I just about covered the cost of my trip, and so it wasn't put out. Obviously that wasn't without a lot of work on my part, but it's kind of like both of us taking that jump of, you know, I put up the cost of the trip in the hope that it would come back, and the same with Tulsa, put the cost there. Unfortunately I didn't sell enough shots to even come close to covering the cost of the trip. However, it's put our YouTube channel, your YouTube channel in a position where I now start to see some return on that. So that's quite exciting.
I would definitely call it our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't exist without you.
I mean, it is called Ruth Assel. It's not called... I have my own YouTube channel, it's 226. I just don't use it, but I think that's coming soon. I'd quite like to... In the UK, there's not really a lot of media surrounding the up and coming pros like yourself, so I don't know if like Tom Davis or George Goodwin, Elliot Smales on the male side, and then on the female side you've got like Indy Lee, Lucy Hall, Nikki Bartlett. A lot of them aren't up and coming by any means, they're like quite established, but there's no real like they don't have photographers following them around at races. They do have to wait a week for the shots. They don't have any video being created, so I'd really like to start to bridge that gap and make sure that those people start to see content and get hold of it, which is something I was super keen for in Daytona, to make sure I shot everyone got, like even Kat Matthews, obviously through BMC, she's got James and great access there, but doesn't really have loads of content. So it's something that I'm hoping to start driving more of, and then in return, you know, hopefully I can start to work with brands and we can start to work with brands and build something out, because that's something that Talbot and Kenny, and there's obviously a lot of others, they're just the most well known, do very well in the States, is bring both like the whole platform of pros to people. So in the UK, I think we're a bit behind that curve.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's probably a bit of a kind of British versus American thing as well, in terms of the Brits like to be a bit more understated. I think for a lot of people, they find that kind of media and putting themselves out there quite awkward. And it can be quite awkward, it definitely can. But I think the Americans, because there's so much more of this kind of media around sport, like it's much more normalised to kind of have people getting profiled and put something out there. Whereas, I'd say actually a lot of the British pros don't even actually do that much on Instagram and stuff. Because
but it's also more taboo right over here. We struggle with, let's look at Sam for the example. Sam said he was going to take Lionel to the line in St George and did. He then said he was going to win Ironman Tulsa and didn't. He had a rough day, but like in the UK there'd be lots of like, why are you saying you're going to win when you're not? And like the social media world is quite critical over here, whereas like Sam didn't lose anything in saying he was going to win and not. He learned a load of lessons, and you know, over there the Americans love him for being confident. There's a slight difference there as well, and that being outspoken over here is a bit more
I think it's definitely perceived as being arrogant as opposed to confident, or just kind of having that belief.
While we're on the topic of content, like what we're offering brands and where we're trying to get to with the model,
I think there's a few different things here. So I think one of the things is it's kind of showing hopefully like a bit more of the journey in terms of like what else happens behind the scenes, like not just the training sessions, a little bit of the kind of, you know, what else do you get up to when you're just hanging out and relaxing a bit, or what are some of the other things that you wouldn't necessarily see. So, you know, I think probably one of my favourite videos was that kind of behind the scenes at Tulsa, because it showed, you know, a little bit more of that interaction with the pros beforehand, some of that pre-race stuff that you wouldn't necessarily talk about because you don't see it as like an important thing or like something that you would necessarily do, but in showing it in the video, that is actually part of my preparation. More access to what do I do, how do I do it, and I guess why, because that's the other thing. I think it's quite easy to kind of say either like this is my training or this is my nutrition plan, but you then say in like an Instagram post, you don't necessarily get the context behind why, or the kind of thought that's gone into that, or the experimentation, etc. So I think the YouTube kind of gives that platform to kind of talk about it more and give a bit more of the context. It's easier for people to kind of interact if they can kind of see you, if they can then, I guess, relate to you a bit more. Part of the reason of kind of wanting to show that journey from age group to pro is wanted people to see that by putting in some hard work or actually doing the training and getting that bit more recovery, you can make these big improvements. Because, you know, it's probably one of the questions I get asked the most of like, what's your biggest change? Obviously, I'm only working part-time, so that is the biggest change, but that has basically meant that I can sleep way more, mainly. Like I'm probably now averaging 9 hours a night rather than 6, so that's quite a big, quite a big difference. So yes, I think number one, that kind of more access and more context around what I'm doing. I think the other thing is then you can do some like quite specific things around either like this is a race or this is a training session, or say when it was like the Zwift Pro Series, it's quite a nice way of kind of documenting it and having concise little snapshot of it, which again, the photos, they do to a certain extent, but again, they don't quite give that whole how did it feel, what was my reaction to it, etc. So I think there's that. But then the main thing with it is I think it is just that kind of interaction with people. I think it's much easier to kind of engage with someone and get that sense of what they're like and why they're doing what they do when you can hear them talk about it. So I'd say like someone like Daniela doesn't do that much on social media that's kind of not just like a real little snapshot. And in some ways, I think that's almost the kind of brand around herself that she's going to. But interestingly, if you speak to a lot of the pros, they would kind of say she would be like the most unapproachable person, say around like transition or just generally around the race. because she's portrayed that real like focus, she's not shown that much of herself. So I think in some ways it's probably quite a clever tactic from her to kind of put that on, and it's probably a bit of a mental thing for her to kind of say to the other competitors, this is me, I'm super focused. But for me, for example, so actually I'd rather have people know a bit more about me, like I'd rather be able to talk about what are those bad moments, what are the things I struggle with, all of that, because I think actually it kind of adds that bit of vulnerability that I think is probably a bit more valuable to some brands, like maybe not to others. And I think when you're in Daniela's position, you can probably do whatever you want because, she is the best. Yeah. So, yes, I think it's that kind of...
Yeah, more of a story to sell to brands rather than just being entirely performance-based. And then obviously we can then show the impact the brands have, both through training and racing, based on how they interact with that story. So, yeah. And then there's more of a model as well of like obviously content is helpful for brands. Like they can sell content essentially. Yeah. People buy product based on what they're selling. We can give them that, but then also they can tell a story and tell their impact through the content that we create. So that's quite fun.
And I think saying like a YouTube video, you can show a lot more of a product. So I don't know if it's like a bit of bike kit. So it's like wheels, for example. You can kind of actually show how they roll, maybe like some comparisons of, or like you setting them up or whatever. I think there's like lots of different things you can do with a video that's more than just like a photo to kind of say, here's my new set of wheels. You can actually talk a bit more about, oh, okay, I thought they felt smoother or better, or things like that.
Yeah, you get more of the story than what you just get in that snapshot. And what does the ideal sponsor look like?
It's really important to me that it's brands that I believe in and that I like. So, I think one of the things that I worked really hard to do before going pro was actually put myself in a financial position where I wasn't relying on sponsors, because I didn't want to be having to chase random sponsors and just finding someone that was either giving me bits that I needed or a bit of cash so that I could survive. I wanted to be in a position where I could still pick what I thought the best stuff was, to kind of say, actually, it is more about performance. Like, I'm more worried about that. For me, it's obviously got to be really good kit or, whatever it is they're producing. So it's like nutrition. I find it quite important that they are easy to deal with. Because again, I think, there's lots of potential for it to add quite a lot of stress and to be one of those relationships that you're maybe getting some stuff out of it, but it's quite difficult, etc. I think it's also nice when they've got similar kind of values. So I think, for me at the moment, I like some of the brands that are trying to do a bit more around trying to encourage more women to get into not just triathlon, because I think triathlon can be quite difficult to get into for certain people. Almost like breaking down some of those barriers, but actually just trying to get more women active and enjoying exercise. Some of the brands that clearly have that real performance focus as a key thing to them, so but without making it just like super pricey for the sake of it, because I think again it's like I want things to be sort of good value but also the best. A combination of like being something that genuinely has the best performance potential but that also has some of the key values that I believe in.
I think it's from my side important that they work with us on the content side of things as well. And so we create quite an organic model, I would say. Like so far we've not pushed any content for the sake of pushing content or pushed a brand that you don't believe in. So it's always good when they give us a bit more reign to say, like, we like the model you're doing, here's some kit, start to roll with that and then build us into your story, rather than you're right, that's much easier when it's authentic and you enjoy it and they're easy to work with, than if it's doing it for the sake of a bit of money, which luckily you haven't had to do yet at all. And while we're talking like what we're trying to achieve with the model and the brand, it's like showing age group as a bit more that the pro field isn't too dissimilar to the age group field. Obviously you go a lot faster, but like behind the scenes, you'll be able to talk about this like in a sec when we go through like the changes from age group to pro. Like obviously you're resting and sleeping a lot more, but when you actually arrive at races, like you get your wristband pretty quick and you get a nice spot in transition, but it's definitely felt very much like the age group race in a lot of senses. There's not been too much special treatment, and like, you know, you don't suddenly start doing everything differently. Like,
No.
and it's the same with age groupers, where, you know, most age groupers will have it that you see the same people at races, and you go for dinner the night before, and you go out for coffee and lunch, and like, it's felt very much like that. I've only been to 2 races so far, Daytona and Tulsa, but Outlaw as well. So it has felt very similar to the age group. I don't know what you found the main, well, both around racing and in general, the similarities and differences of going pro have been.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think actually that's probably one of the reasons why triathlon has such a mass appeal, because you definitely get the sense that it's a really level playing field in terms of what the pros are doing, what the age groups are doing. Like, you're racing on the same course, you're doing the same sort of transition, you've generally got everything that you have to deal with is the same in terms of like conditions, the roads, etc. That's definitely a big part of it. So I think in terms of similarities, actually the one that I think has been the nicest similarity is that feel around the races, the kind of everyone being friendly, everyone being supportive. It's, you know, you still get people on the start line, like they'll all wish each other luck, and you can kind of tell it's quite a good vibe generally. Like, people want everyone to do well, people want to beat everyone, but on a good day. Like, people want to sort of show what they've done. So that's been really nice, because that's felt the same. You know, I think before my first pro race in Australia, you know, I stood on that start line and a few of the girls were all sort of saying, you know, good luck with your first pro race, and I had a few of them after to kind of be like, how was it? And so that's really good. I think training's pretty similar. Like, I'm probably doing a little bit more volume, but not massive. Things are very similar, you know, like I still have to get the same kind of kit, I'm still having to
I suppose with the
do all of
difference
that.
being that now your income is based on how well you do. Actual racing, your performance dictates, you know, now especially with the PTO, the rankings.
So I guess there's a lot more pressure around racing. If, well, again, like kind of if you choose to let that dictate your race. But yeah, there's definitely, and I've definitely thought a bit more about, do I have to race more tactfully? You know, do I need to think a bit more about what races I go to and how that might affect both my PTO ranking and sort of Kona qualification. So, you know, I've obviously been in the lucky spot this year that I've not been chasing a Kona qualification because I had it from Florida. But if I had been, Tulsa probably still would have been on my list because there was quite a lot of Kona slots there.
And you would have qualified.
And I would have qualified. Bolton potentially would have been further up my list, although they announced that really late. So I probably would have already been out in America. Well, I was out in America when they announced it, so that would have maybe been a no-go. So I think there's definitely more elements in terms of choosing races. And I guess probably as an age grouper, I was keener to kind of go for what are the challenging races, what are the ones that are maybe like a bit more iconic or just like a really cool place to visit. Whereas now I guess I have to think a bit more about what's the prize money for it, what's the field like, do I think it's something that can help increase my PTO ranking?
Does it course suit your...
Does it suit the kind of athlete that I am? So yeah, there's definitely more to think about in terms of the racing and the planning. And then I guess the other benefit of being a pro is I don't have to enter races until quite late. So whilst in some senses COVID's been a bit of a pain in terms of you haven't really been able to plan anything, the other hand, actually having a bit more flexibility means that if you get injuries, if something else happens that you need to kind of deal with, you've actually got that flexibility to say, well, I don't have to enter a race until 2-3 weeks before it. So you can also kind of make a bit of a judgment based on how your training's been going and your fitness to kind of say, yep, I'm peaking, or no, I actually feel terrible, I'm going to skip that race.
That's the same in the race, right? The DNF scenario that age groupers get quite hung up about. They forget that, you know, you could run the marathon and it'd be in your legs for 4 weeks, or you could sack it off halfway and get a paycheck a week later. Yeah,
I think there's definitely more to think about during the race. I think Ironman's always slightly different because it's so long, kind of anything can happen. Like, you never quite know who's going to blow up at the front, who else is going to do whatever. So I think Ironman's probably a bit different in terms of sometimes it is still worth persevering and keeping going just in case other things happen. At the same time, the Ironman takes so much out of you that actually if you're, say, chasing a Kona slot and there's another opportunity in a couple of weeks, then yeah, you probably are sensible to kind of stop it and save yourself for the next one.
So we talked a bit about how I'm paid. Obviously, some of that is through selling money back to your sponsors or others, like at a race, just sponsors in general. there's revenue streams through YouTube now. For us, to monetize a YouTube channel, you have to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 public hours of watch time. Obviously, we know that, but we've been chasing it for 18 months. But other people might not know that. And then once you hit that, you're on average making a couple of pounds a day, and that goes right up to, whatever. I don't really know what sort of Lionel and Lucy and Reese and the bigger channels are making. So there's a tight content in terms of your revenue is a tiny piece of the puzzle, and obviously it's the entire puzzle of mine. But yeah, do you want to talk through like the other ways?
From a triathlon perspective, my main money at the moment has been prize money, which has not been a huge amount. I kind of had, I think it was $500 from Western Australia. I think it was $4,000 from Florida, 2,000 from Daytona, 2.5 or 3 from Tulsa. Although all of that also gets taxed, so what you actually see is a lot less than that. The American tax is like 30%, so you don't see a huge amount. I've also had some issues with getting some of the money with all of the name change stuff. I've not seen my Western Australia or Florida money yet. A constant dialogue with Ironman about where it seems to have disappeared to. Fair play to Ironman, they are being good and chasing, so this is not a Ironman haven't paid me, it's just that money has never appeared in my account yet from over a year ago. Zwift racing. So I guess probably the total of what I've made from prize money is about 10 grand over the last 18 months, which clearly is not enough to live on or do anything. And probably the amount I've spent on travel and racing and kit is probably at least double that, I would have thought. I have actually got all the stats somewhere because I did a little of what my 2020 expenses and stuff was. And I think with 2020, I'd just about broken even when I got if I got the Florida money. So counting that, because I know it is on its way. Triathlon wise, it's a kind of, at the moment, I'm barely keeping my head above the water from the stuff that I'm making. I don't have any sponsors that are paying me any money yet, other than a couple of podium bonuses from Precision Hydration, which I've not been on a podium yet, so have not managed to reap in that benefit, but they're quite small as well, so they're not really making much of a difference. So that's where actually the whole sponsorship side of things is really tough. Like, it's very easy to get free kit. It's very hard to try and get any kind of cash until you get to the point where you're like a Daniela or someone like that is then getting the big sponsors who I think it's a bit more normal for them to be paying cash contracts. I think one of the things that makes that much harder is actually all of the age groupers. So we've talked about this a little bit, because there's so many age groupers that love having sponsors, and like literally zero disrespect to people doing that, because that's exactly what I did when I was an age grouper. But that means the brands can give free kit away for all these age groupers, that some of the top age groupers also have really big social media followings. They don't have to pay them because the age groupers don't expect to get paid. They just give a bit of free kit and the age groupers will go and advertise it wonderfully for them. So it is quite tough, especially in a kind of UK market where there isn't as much media around it. So I'd say somewhere like Germany, they love triathlon. They hold a lot of their best German triathletes up in really high regard. You can see, some of them win like the kind of sports personality of the year, etc., which we definitely don't get that. Getting cash out of triathlon, very hard. Hence why we've been trying to kind of, I guess, build the content and a bit more of the brand, kind of say we've got something a bit different and it is actually worth a bit of cash.
Even then, we struggle to get cash out of sponsors for content, even though they can directly track income to that content. They can put a post out or put some ads out and work out exactly how much money that made, and therefore how much money we essentially made them. And even so, they still want to try and give us free kit for content. Whereas I have to say, some brands are great. There's some brands we don't even work with that have bought content off us, which has been really good. But for the same reason that age groupers will give images away for free, hopefully people will think they're not quite the same quality, but some of the shots an age grouper can provide aren't terrible. They showcase the kit very well. They can be shared on a brand's social media. So some of the brands with lower budgets will take free shots, average shots from age groupers rather than pay us a retainer to create high quality content for them. And, you know, we're not charging extortionate prices. I think as far as the sports photographers go, I'm probably still one of the cheapest. Yeah, we're just struggling to get the cash out of the brands at all. It is becoming an increasingly competitive market fueled by social media. Results are counting less and less to a lot of the brands, and I get it because, you know, results don't always sell products. Results have sold millions of dollars of new Nike shoes, but they don't necessarily sell all the brand's products. So
yeah, agreed. Alongside that, I guess I'm still working part-time for Lloyd's, so I still work 2 days a week. So that's basically my living cost, which is quite helpful. And also really nice to have, I guess, something that's a bit different from triathlon. It kind of takes the focus away, takes the mind away from just sport and me and being selfish, which is quite nice. As of November last year, I also started coaching under Riot Racing Club, which was set up by my coach of, I think, nearly 6 years now, Will. It's something I've been thinking about for a little while, and I actually said to him, look, you know, I've been working with you for so long. I know your coaching style. I obviously think it works because it's worked pretty well for me. And I quite like the idea of, I guess, helping other people reach their potential, improve, get whatever they wanted to get out of the sport. And I'd been able to see at some races that he had been at where I was racing the kind of just how much he took out of that kind of coaching role. So I was like, actually, you know, I think I could, you know, be quite good and help some people and do that. So starting in November, I've got 8 athletes, well, potentially a couple more about to come on. Actually, like, really fun. It's kind of, you know, I've got a varying degree of abilities of people that I'm coaching, some quite new to it, some with like much less time than others. But yeah, and most of them have not been able to race yet with COVID, but lots of races coming up in the next sort of month or so. So that's going to be exciting to watch. And I actually managed to watch one of my athletes race at Leeds last weekend, which was really good.
So far, I don't think your pro results have necessarily reflected the calibre of your age group results, mainly because you've had 2 pro races. Like, you know, Western Australia, you had a bit of an issue with the bike. Florida, you had stomach issues on the run. Daytona, you DNF for your injury. And Tulsa, again, you swam and ran great, but your bike maybe wasn't quite where we've seen it in the past. Whereas when you look at your age group results, you know, your Roth result was very strong. In Kona, you were top 20 overall. So there's definitely progression for your pro result. Compared to where you are now, compared to where you want to be, we will be able to offer sponsors, or you will be able to offer sponsors more from the results side. You know, we're not talking about you finishing 40th at Kona every year and top 20 at every race. You know, you are moving and have plans to move to the pointy end of the racing field. So we are looking for people to invest early before either that happens or, you know, our content becomes more valuable. You know, we've got this, I suppose it's a bit like our model. We started working together at a time when, well, I was free for a start and you weren't a pro. You know, you weren't even on Zwift at the time. It was way pre all of that. So, and then because of that, you know, we've grown together, the model has changed. We're now, as a partnership, much more valuable. And we're hoping that only exponentially increases, right? So,
agreed.
Yeah,
I think that's, for me, part of why I'm trying quite early to get in with some brands for next year, because I think actually there is a massive progression to come. Like, as you said, like, I've not put together a whole race that I'm happy with. I think most pros would probably argue that there's always something in their race that they think they can improve or do better, but I don't think that I've come anywhere near showing my potential overall in a race, like kind of putting all 3 together well. So hopefully we'll get it right and peak for Kona, which would be nice. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more to come. I think, you know, I'm still really quite new to this in terms of triathlon. Like, okay, yeah, I've been doing it properly, I'd say, since like 2015, but that was like 4 years of doing it alongside a very demanding job. And it's only really been, a year and a half of doing it as a pro, and a year of that's been with COVID. So I think, you know, there's a lot more to come. A lot of it, I think, is also getting some of that experience racing as a pro. I say particularly as a female, I think the racing as a pro is quite different generally because you've got a much smaller field. So, you know, a lot of the Ironman races you'd maybe have not so much at the moment. Like COVID times are a bit different, and it'll be really interesting to see if Ironman potentially decrease the number of pro races they've got. Because one of the nice things has been, because there's been so few races, the field's been stacked in COVID times, whereas usually you'd maybe get like 6 or 7 women racing a pro race. So clearly it's all very spread out. Quite often, I guess, you'd only have like a 5-minute gap back to the age group men. So then like the pro women's race is getting a bit mixed up with the age group men. So I think it is quite a different feel when you're used to and again, probably different to like the top age group men, because they probably spent most of their race on their own because they're right at the front. There's not many people around. Whereas as a top age group woman, you're generally around quite a lot of men. So definitely like really different dynamics. You know, I think both Florida and Tulsa, more Florida, like Florida, I actually had a few people that I was swimming with, which was quite nice for me. That doesn't happen very often. But hopefully starting to happen a bit more now. But then the whole bike, until maybe like the last 40 minutes, I think it was, until I caught Meredith. Up to that point, that whole bike had been on my own. I'd caught like a couple of age groupers that had come past me in the swim that I then got on the bike. But other than that, there was like 180k like pretty much on my own, which in some ways I quite like, because it means you dictate your race. But in other ways, you know, that is quite hard. Whereas as I hopefully get that swim better, I'll then be more in the race to start with and have like people around me, and I guess then it becomes a bit more tactics based as opposed to just go off your own power. But yeah, so I think there's very different race dynamics, and again, I think then, you know, Kona's going to be completely different because of the level of everyone. So whilst I think the swim ability is still quite mixed, you then know that you get out on that bike and the run, and pretty much everyone there is like a very good biker and a very good runner. So I'm quite excited to see what kind of feels like. I feel like that will maybe feel a bit more like racing as an age grouper, because you will have more people around you. So that'll be good. But yeah, I think it's definitely something to be said from getting that experience as a pro, like how it feels, what the kind of race dynamics tend to be like, and how different that is kind of race on race.
How has it been? You know, like with racing as a pro, you are now putting a bit more pressure on yourself. Like we are trying to avoid that scenario, but that inevitably is your livelihood. How has that been not performing at quite the level you want yet? Is that frustrating still, or is it actually, you know, you're still just focusing on the positives and we know it will come soon?
It's probably a bit of a mix. I think it's definitely some frustration with knowing what I can do in training versus what I can then, or, you know, what I've seen results-wise in races. But I think, you know, to a certain degree, everyone has that. You know, I think you, out of all people, understand knowing how good your training is and not quite putting it together in a race. So, and actually, you know, I think that's probably something that a lot of age groupers will have, because I think actually almost as an age grouper you find it more, where you'll have some really good consistent training, and then because of maybe some other external factors or just putting that pressure on or whatever, you don't quite have it on race day. So that's, I think, definitely something everyone can relate to. In some ways it's quite nice not having quite performed at where you think you are, because I think, again, every single pro thinks they can get better. Generally speaking,
every single athlete thinks they can get better.
Every single athlete, yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it, because what's the fun in keeping going if you don't think you're getting any better? There's something about not performing to your current potential that is really frustrating. I think you just feel like you've let down some of that training that you've done, because you kind of feel like, I've put in all those hours, I know I'm better than that. You know, you want to prove it to yourself, you want to prove it to other people. I think definitely as someone who is a bit more of a new pro, so I still feel like a very new pro just through like the amount of races that I've had. You still kind of want some of that external validation of you're good enough to be a pro. I guess when you feel like you're not necessarily proving how good you know that you are in training, it kind of, it feels like a bit of like I've really let myself down to not prove to everyone else that I'm good enough.
Is that what scares you the most? Hitting a stage where you've not... Two questions. One, if it's not this, what is it? And if it is this, because we know another athlete who I had coffee with last week, that I won't name names, and they said in particular around racing, that's what they're most scared of. Really, is that they've put in all this work to get to where they currently are, and I can relate to this. This is one of my biggest fears. On paper in training, I'm probably one of the strongest I've been, and the people we ride with, I can always keep up running the same. But in a race, on paper, I never live up to that. I wonder if the athlete I was speaking to said the same. They were worried that they wouldn't ever string a result together that reflects the work they've done. I'm positive me, you, and them all will. Yep. However, that is a genuine worry for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Do you find the same thing, or is there anything you're still scared of around racing as both being a pro and just being an athlete?
It's a really difficult one, right? And actually it's one that I probably thought I knew what some of my biggest fears were. Maybe wasn't being quite honest with myself about what they were. It took a pretty brutal session with Lee on Monday, who's been my mindset coach for the last couple of months, to kind of really dig into it. My biggest fear is that I'm actually just not good enough. It's not even about putting the work in and not showing it. It's that I could put all the work in possible and just not be good enough to be. And it's not necessarily to say I'm not good enough to be a pro, but it's like I'm not good enough to be where I think I want to be, which is at the top. Because I think for me, being quite a competitive person, and I think based off some of those kind of age group results that I've got, is sure in my head that I can be top 5 at Kona one day. Yeah, my fear is probably that I would realise that actually I'm not good enough to do that, and that that's not going to happen. In which case I think it would be really hard to stay motivated, because I don't really want to be one of those people that just floats through races, gets some like top 5s here and there, but never quite wins anything or never quite performs on that world-class stage.
I mean, we should also add there that some athletes never perform at Kona. So you look at Jesse Thomas and he doesn't. Yes. You have ticked the box where you've proved to both yourself and everyone else that you can perform in those conditions. So there's no variable of, can I race in Kona? We know you can race in Kona. We've seen that happen. And I think it's the same with, you don't need to prove you're good enough to be a pro anymore, because you won the age group field at Kona. And there was a stage last year, the year before, 2019, where you won nearly every age group race you started, and in Nice, you were 3 weeks post crash, or 5 weeks post crash at 70.3 worlds, and you finished like 11th age grouper, and you hadn't really done any swim. You hadn't swum at all.
Done 3 swims.
Yeah, and so I think we know that. We'll just get that one on the record, that obviously you don't need to prove to anyone, not even yourself, that you're good enough to be a pro. You would like to prove to yourself that you're good enough to
be a good pro,
to be competitive.
Yeah. So I think like that's probably, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that, because I think that's a very similar fear to the fear that you're talking about of just not performing to your potential. Because I guess, you could argue that if I can have that kind of performance at Kona whilst I'm working like a ridiculous week and getting 6 hours sleep a night and being 12 weeks post a collarbone surgery, that theoretically I should be able to just keep. And also I think being like reasonably new to endurance sport and almost like high-end sport, I guess. I don't have a proper sporty background as a kid in terms of doing anything at any kind of high level. Like I did lots of sport and I enjoyed it and I liked it, but like I'm not someone that was like a county runner or did anything that seriously, which I think a lot of people probably underestimate how much of a good base that gives you. Sure. I'd say even when it's not at like a really high levels, someone like Kat Matthews, for example, like completely apologise if I've got this completely wrong. I don't think she was like running as like a real runner when she was young, but I think she did some like county cross country and did kind of enough running that clearly she's always been a very good runner. Whereas I've always been someone who's like more of like a plodder. But then you can see with her, like she's really got that run pedigree. I'm not trying to take away from like the training that she's done, because clearly the training she's done has taken her from being a good runner to like pretty much the best runner in our sport at the moment. When you've got a bit more of a base in a sport, and you see it particularly in swimming, if you've got a good swim background, like you're always going to have that, and you probably don't need to swim that much a week, and you're still going to always have it to drop back on and it's not really something you need to worry about. Knowing all of that, I guess part of me is like, don't be so hard on yourself because you've still got years. That's the other nice thing, to be fair. Seeing people like Meredith Kessler, you're like, oh, well, I've still got at least 10 years to keep doing this and I can still be competitive.
Yeah.
So there is zero pressure, but I think it's also quite hard in this world of liking to get things immediately. You know, I can order my Morrison's shop off Amazon and get it in 2 hours. Yeah. Like, I want to see results quickly, but I've also got to recognise that it's not going to come quickly. Like, you have to put the time in, you have to be patient, and then hopefully it'll come.
I imagine we'll go to Kona a week or two, if we're not already there, out from the race. You'll know better logistics, and then I'll talk through how the content might look.
Yeah, so I think for Kona, there's 2 realistic options at the moment, which are yet to be decided. Option number 1 is go and do altitude again beforehand, which would mean probably doing a good 3 to 4 week camp somewhere. And I'd say probably at this moment it would either be back in Santa Fe or it would be Boulder, would be my 2 options. It's really easy if you're spending a lot of time out in those conditions beforehand to really overcook yourself. So yeah, option number 1 is altitude and then heat. Option number 2 is actually just go and spend maybe like a month before either in Kona or Maui. So being in those conditions, I mean, Maui is probably my preference because the cycling's much nicer. Kona cycling is absolutely terrible, but I'm not sure what the running's like in Maui, so I'd need to do a bit of research. I'd assume quite good because people like Daniela and Sebastian Keeney go there most years before Kona, so I think there's probably a reasonably good setup. So yeah, that's the other option. So it's a kind of, and it depends a bit on who else I've got that I can potentially train with. I think it's all very well getting the right kind of conditions or stuff. One of the things that I loved so much about Boulder was having that group to train with, having people to like push you on in certain disciplines, which was really nice. And I think for me, you know, that key thing will be, do I have some people that I can swim with? Because that swim in Kona is going to be absolutely crucial for me. I really need to be able to hang with that main pack. Otherwise, it's going to make for a very tough race. So I've definitely found that swimming with people really helps bring my swim on a bit. I've actually had a couple of the best swims I've had ever this week, which I think is based off the back of all that training with the group that I did in Boulder, and then having had like a couple of weeks rest post Ironman. Either I need to be able to bring out people that I can train with, or I need to be in an environment where there is a group that I can train with. That will help a little bit, but then it also depends a little bit on what other people want to do, because it's not just me. So
I'm obviously tagging on to whatever you do for hopefully for that period. The content will look like we'll do some location based stuff on wherever we are. If it's Boulder again, you know, we'll do some similar stuff around, you know, maybe the Kona specific stuff in Boulder, how we're getting the heat prep in and that sort of thing. It will be more limited than it was although loads more limited. So I'd also like to then spread that to see, you know, we interacted a bit with Heather last time and very briefly in Tulsa, so whether we can create more around probably more the British athletes, you know, hopefully Nikki Bartlett qualifies soon, and there's people like that we can, there's different people that through the process you will be interacting with, I think is the story that the age groupers just don't see. So it'd be really cool to bring that to YouTube, I suppose, is the way that will be of both, if you're an age grouper wanting to qualify for Kona and you've never been, this is what it looks like, and if you're an age grouper that is going to Kona and wondering what the pros do, this is how their journey looks. So I think that's what most of our content will look like. Split, hopefully mostly hosted on your channel, our channel, and then a little bit will move towards the 226 channel. That's only got not doing anything at the moment, but we'll try and build that up, and then the classic race review and how the off season looks, and then we'll reassess for next year. I won't be doing the Talbot and Kenny and working right up to the day of the race. The content might drop off a cliff 3 days before, but I'm sure it'll come back online.
I think there's also some stuff that we can do around in Kona for the first time as a pro, because even though I've done Kona 3 times, I think it's going to feel very different this year.
Sure,
And also, I guess the other thing is, what does it look like from a COVID perspective? You know, I think at the moment, Hawaii's basically not letting any foreigners in. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there'll be a lot of stuff around, you know, how different does it feel with some of the potential COVID protocols or not. And
the age group feels going to be in numbers the same, but in ability quite limited, right? Because we've not had the European calendar that we used to. We've missed a lot of racing where some of the world's best age groupers just won't get a chance to qualify because of travel restrictions, which would be a real shame, but then gives more people an opportunity to qualify. So I suppose I can see both sides of that coin. You know, if you were building a brand again, how would that look? I think for me, the first thing we did was sit down and say, look, what are we trying to achieve? What are your unique selling points? What are my strengths? What am I going to be very honest with that? You know, I didn't ever tell you that we would create the world's best videos, but I did say that, you know, I would be around as often as I could when you needed me. That's obviously about to improve yet again. And now this next period will be the first time we've ever lived in like the same location. I think a lot of people have always assumed we're quite close geographically, but
lots of people think that we're going out. So.
Well, no, we're definitely not.
Which we are not, just to clarify.
Yeah, I think we've most of the time been 200 miles apart, 150 miles apart. Also kept very clear with the intentions of what both parties want out of the relationship, and therefore like, you know, I wanted to learn content, learn the platforms and bring content to people. You wanted the content and to tell your story. So yeah, I'd be very clear if you're an athlete on those things. And if you don't have access to a photographer, then you can do it yourself as long as you set out, you know, this is what I'm trying to do. And, you know, there's some great content creators that, like Harry Palmer's got quite a big YouTube following. He films it himself. Chasing Triathlon, Rachel and Andre, they film it themselves.
Well, there's quite a lot of people that are doing it on if it's not themselves, it's like their other half or someone that's always around. For me, if I was doing it again, I'd probably try and leverage a lot more whilst I was still an age grouper and with Zwift, some of the brands I could connect with a bit. So like I definitely did try as I was going pro to, you know, talk to people like Specialized, because obviously I really like that bike. And some of the other brands and Roka as well actually at that point, but didn't really have much success. So I guess I'd probably try and think a bit more about how was I marketing myself, because I still truly believe it's quite a interesting story in terms of coming from being an age grouper to a pro at this kind of point in your life and post something like the crash, etc. So I think there's lots of things that has lots of potential, which I didn't quite manage to really get anyone interested in.
Yeah, it's very different to elite triathlete at under 18 level, under 23 level, turned pro, jumped up to long course, or came from a high performance squad, couldn't make the Olympic squad, so jumped straight up. You know, you see that with the likes of George Goodwin. I think Daniel Bakkegaard would be something similar. Lucy Charles, you know, she's not come in through triathlon, but was obviously an elite swimmer and has then made the jump straight to long course and missed that. So yeah, a lot of the pros have just jumped straight up. Some of the other people in your position are like Renee Kiley. Renee and...
Actually, her story's amazing, to be fair. For anyone who needs some inspiration, she was working a corporate job, was really obese, smoked like 20 a day, seriously unfit, and has, turned her life around and become a really good pro. So.
And even like Kim and Kat, right? They're also, you know, you and Kim often race back and forth quite closely, and Kat at the moment is having some amazing results, and she hasn't come through any performance squads or anything. So yeah, it's definitely that kind of story to showcase that, you know, if you are mid-20s, early 30s, and you're considering triathlon and you want to explore where you can take it,
it's worth doing.
Yeah, there is definitely the capacity to do that, which is quite cool. And think about the other things to really think about if you want to grow yourself as a brand and connect with more brands, what you can offer other people and other brands. I think that's a big one, is people forget that that's a two-way. You know, we're approaching brands and saying, this is how much money we can make you, this is what we can offer you, and this is the model, and they can very quickly see tangible results from giving us either money or kit or things like we're trying to obviously move away from the kit model, but we know exactly what our model is to offer them and can have that initial meeting. Whereas I think a lot of age groupers think that a few Instagram followers comes directly with with kit, which it does to some extent because brands know the value of those Instagram followers and the engagement, but definitely need worth some thought around that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's probably really hard to do, but that would probably be the most helpful, is in that trying to determine what your value is and how you kind of pitch it. So my initial year as a pro, I was literally basically like, I don't really think I can offer very much. I tried with the brands that I love, like Specialized, to kind of say, this is my story, will you support me? And they said no. So I then basically went down the model of, well, I don't need that much, so I'll just go like minimal on who I was approaching and working with. Then this year, I felt a bit more like I've got a bit more to offer, and was, really happy to get someone like Sigma on board. I've kept like Precision Hydration, who've actually been like my longest sponsor. They've been with me since my first kind of age group days, so it's really nice to still work with them. And thought I'd try Hoob this year just for a bit of a change. But I think I've still struggled a bit to kind of almost define what I think my value is and what I think I should be getting in return. As I said, I don't think it's easy. I think it's really hard.
And sticking to that's hard as well, right?
And sticking to it, yeah. Especially when, I don't know, if you think actually the whole package that I've got should be worth this amount, but no one's willing to pay for it, do you stick to your guns or do you change a bit? Because I think, I'd probably say this year I've adjusted to be like, actually, there's still some things that I need and that I can get value out of taking. Do I think that's my complete value? No. Like, I think ultimately, for next year, I'd like to be working with people that see a bit more of that value and can, and I guess where it can be a bit more of a kind of two-way partnership. So I think that's also quite important to me, that you feel like you have some input in that brand, depending on the brand. There's some brands that you're not going to have any input, but you just want to work with them because they're the best. But I think there are some brands where you can say, actually, I think I can add value in this way or that way. But yeah, I think that as a kind of going from an age grouper to a pro is probably one of the things I've found the hardest, because it's really hard to kind of say, I think I'm worth this, or this is my story, come and sponsor me because I'm so great. Because it's I think for most people, probably like 99% of people, a very unnatural thing to do, to kind of be like, I'm the best, come and sponsor me. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the hardest things.